Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Akshita Iyer, CEO and co-founder of Ome. Akshita was an analyst and program manager at the Duke University Health System before joining the IoT tech startup world. At Ome, she spends her time focused on the smart kitchen of the future. Welcome here. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me, Chuck. I am always excited to talk about the smart home, so it is a pleasure to have this chat with you today.
Yeah, tell me. Let's start first about the IoT startup world because that's where you live. What is that still alive? Are there still companies starting up? Is it too mature? What's the status?
Yeah, it's been an interesting few years. I think when, Nest was acquired, actually 10 years ago, you saw, an influx of so many smart home companies, right? Home security and, HVAC systems. And I think though, we are now a bit at a saturation point when it comes to like home security and maybe the broader smart home at large. And I would also say that this has been impacted by the funding environment. These companies that have hardware products are capital intensive. And so I think, there were a lot of companies that went under in the last 5 years that maybe started 10 years ago because of all the supply chain issues we've had during COVID. I think the funding environment specifically for smart home companies is just not trending. And so I don't see as many smart home companies starting up right now, but like with every industry, it's bound to reemerge at some point.
Well, right now, AI is the hot thing in the market.
Sure
Obviously,
is.
that's obviously the back end of IoT.
Yeah.
Where do you see that fitting in the grand scheme? As you know, at CES every year there's a buzz. One year it was voice agents, then it was IoT, then it was AI. Now it's going to be ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think AI is going to play a big role. What it looks like, we're all trying to figure out. But where I see the most potential, especially in the smart home, is we're all used to having smart devices, right? We're all used to having smart hardware that retrofits to something we already have, a new appliance, a new, a smart thermostat. But what we haven't yet captured, in my opinion, is all of the data that's really coming from these devices every day that we can offer to consumers, businesses, property managers in an actionable way. And I think AI is going to play a role in aggregating all this information and understanding it over time so that we can make life more efficient and safer and more convenient. And I think we're just scratching the surface when it comes to utilizing all of that data to be able to offer value beyond just, the day-to-day convenience we see.
So where do smart things fit in this? I mean, everything is, as you just mentioned, everything's been becoming smart. I mean, smart is being built in, it's being attached to things. What is the role of smart things these days?
It's a lot of different applications. I mean, when you look at the smart home, I think it's become so much more important to have quote unquote smart things that are actually saving us time or making life safer. And if you look at the last few years, especially, our lives have changed a lot, right? Because of COVID, I think all of us are spending more time at home, some hybrid model maybe. The home has become more important than ever before. And so consumers are looking at smart home technology so that they can optimize the things that they're doing every day. I mean, even you look at food as medicine has come to the forefront of healthcare because data is showing that when you cook at home, you lead a healthier life. But most of us don't have an hour or two every day to cook. And so I think, the evolution of the smart home and smart things is, trending more towards what are you actually doing for me every day versus a gadget that looks cool, but it doesn't actually save me time or doesn't actually make my home safer, or doesn't help my family. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, when we had all of this influx of new smart devices, everyone wanted to try everything. But now there's so many that, the competition is a lot greater and you really have to differentiate what you're offering the consumer.
So for smart technology in the home, are you seeing demographically it going the whole gamut, or is there one demographic group that's, I guess, smarter adopters than another group?
Seems like it depends on the kind of smart technology, right? Generally you've got your early adopters who want the latest and greatest and who want to try every gadget. So, beyond that, I'm a little biased, but I do see that, the baby boomer population, older adult aging in place is really going to take off in terms of leveraging smart technology in an intuitive way that allows us to help all of us, we're all going to age at some point, stay at home longer, retain, our independence. And I don't know if we've really used technology in the most effective way for that demographic. Now, I said, depending on the smart technology, I think the demographic might change, right? You've got companies that are selling cameras for $20 and you have companies that are selling them for $200. And I think the features vary based on the functionality that you want. It's kind of like, different brands that corporates own, right? Because they're tackling different demographics based on price point and functionality and feature set.
So in the future, in terms of connectivity and smartness being built in, we have things like appliances that come, like a washer and dryer may have technology built in and to be able to self-diagnose. But if people don't connect it, it really just sits there. But they paid for it. I don't know if they realize that.
Right.
Where do you see that evolving over time?
In appliances specifically, and I would say in the broader context of the smart home, that's always a challenge, right? The installation, is it easy? Is it seamless? Do you need someone to professionally come and do it? Is one barrier. And then the next thing is, well, is someone connecting it? Is there enough value for someone to connect it? And, I would argue that sometimes with your washer dryers or your dishwashers, the value in connecting it isn't great enough. And so it's like one more step that someone has to take to get it online. And there is a shift now to trying to understand, well, what features do people want, right? So that we can increase engagement. I mean, the value of connectivity for a brand is that you have a direct line of communication to your customer. But if I'm not actually giving them something that they will use digitally, then I lose that interaction. And appliances is interesting only because your appliances last 10 to 15 years. So your window is huge, right? And it's not the same as, your iPhone. Like you upgrade every, year and a half or 2 years or, a lot shorter than that. So I hope that we start to really pinpoint what it is about a certain smart technology, whether it's an appliance or whether it's a home security system, that people actually need and why they need to connect it. Because if we don't really target and emphasize that, nobody's ever going to use it for the intended purpose, right? And I think sometimes with technology, it's very easy, and I can say this myself as a founder and a non-technical one, where I'm like, oh, we could integrate like 20 different features and every one of them sounds really cool, but then the value to the consumer gets lost. There's just too much. And so we've had to also do that, is really narrow down on what is going to get this person to engage with me on a day-to-day basis and start there. You can always expand later.
So over time, because just like in connected cars, the problem in connected cars is there's a legacy infrastructure. There are all these other cars that are not connected, so
Right.
they're not autonomous. So it's really hard to go into that environment. Over time, and I know your product, the products you have are, they're basically retrofit. I mean, making
Yeah.
stoves automatic and so forth. Do you see over time that having to happen almost everywhere because things just last so long? Like appliances, for example, your point of 10 to 15 minutes is a great point. Like someone's not going to go in a year or two buy a new appliance because it has something smart built in.
Yeah. And depending on the industry, like with cars and with long lifespan products like your appliances, I hope, and I think this was our approach, is that, we don't just leave those tens of millions of customers just sitting there, right? Because at least for an appliance, people don't buy them unless their appliance breaks or they need a new one. But there's, like I said, tens of millions of them that we can still engage with, right? Can we learn from what they're doing today and how they're cooking and how they're interacting with their appliances over the next 10 years, so that we can then build an appliance in 15 years that will provide the most value to them. But if we don't have that continuous feedback loop, like we have with a lot of the other products we buy very often, we lose out on leveraging that current install base as a way to drive innovation in a meaningful way. So we haven't seen this a lot for, your long lifespan products. And I'm trying to think of others that would qualify here, but I hope that we can start to think creatively about, smart technology and how we enter the home. And this is one way of doing it.
So does retrofit become the cool new thing for IoT? Based on what you just said, because you got tens of millions of products, and again, people aren't going to just go replace them because something became smart.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a cool new thing, Chuck. I think, Nest started the retrofit 10 years ago or more than that. Right? I mean, they launched maybe 14 years ago and they were acquired in, 2014, where they just took something you use every day, a thermostat we've all been using for decades, and then they just replaced it with a smarter one, right? And it was very easy, to install. It was easy to understand. And then you saw doorbells and door locks and security systems and HVAC systems. So I think these things have been around for a long time. We just have to, I think just for me, I was like, wait, most of our smart devices, even you can look at a baby camera, right? It's really a retrofit. You just are sticking it on the wall. It's very simple. And I think the reason the retrofit has become such a popular way to connect consumers' homes is that it's intuitive and generally more affordable. And when it comes to smart technology, I would argue that the primary factor that should go into development is intuitiveness, just because people do the things that they do every day. And they're likely not going to change anytime soon, right? Maybe over time, consumer habits and preferences will change, but the less you can obstruct the way that someone's already doing something and the way that they have been for a really long time, I think the more adoption you're going to get.
So in terms of a retrofit in general in the industry, in the smart home, when someone retrofits something, whatever it is, doesn't matter. What do you see as a behavior in the future? Do they then say, I'm going to hold off getting a smart thing, whatever it was, because I have the functionality already? Or does it lead them over time to say, I'm going to actually go full smart in these things, or both?
So I would say the jury's still out on this, just because, we're still, a lot of the retrofit devices that we have in the home now are still within their lifespan. What I would guess is that it's kind of like a Trojan horse, where you're getting someone comfortable with the idea of a smart ecosystem. And like I said, in an affordable and intuitive way, and I keep using that word intuitive because I think it's so important to build trust with your customers, so that when you start expanding your ecosystem and you want them to become a full-fledged smart home owner, they are more likely to do that. And I, see this in the, appliance world too, where, if you can get someone digitally connected onto your ecosystem, whether it's recipes or, even just like ordering water filters through their app, when they go to look for a new appliance in 15 years, if they're already using your ecosystem, they already have your app, they are more likely to buy your product because it already fits within their ecosystem and with the things that they're using versus downloading a new app. And so I think you can't go from 0 to 100 here. You have to kind of take some small steps to get people more comfortable, build that trust, that line of communication, build that feedback loop. And then I think it will get easier to have more and more customers using your products as you release them.
So in your system, in your smart kitchen and technology, do you capture data on the back end in terms of behavior?
Yeah, we do. And one of the reasons why we went the retrofit route is that, the threshold to entry and the barrier to entry to get into a consumer's home is a lot less, right? Someone doesn't have to buy a new appliance. What we started to see as we ship product was, hey, there are data points coming every day from people using their stove, right? How long are they cooking? What time of day are they cooking? Which burners are they using? And then, as we started to look at different markets like aging in place and property management, we started to see, and this goes back to the first point we talked about with AI, is can we use this information to feed insights back to the consumer, right? I mean, you see this a lot with wearables like Aura and Fitbit, where we're using all of this like health data so that we can help you live a healthier life. We use our appliances every day, and they can be very valuable indicators about our health and wellness, right? And again, if you look at your cooking appliances, and maybe aging in place is a good example of this, where oftentimes you've got early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, and can we use cooking activity as a way to establish a baseline, and then if there's any deviation, can we send a proactive alert to a caregiver or a family member? And I think this is where some of that AI comes in, right? Can we learn people's habits and preferences, and then can we aggregate that data so that we can offer insights to make life better?
I know you're very consumer focused, but wouldn't that data also be valuable to companies that are, say, creating the next generation of appliance, where they can see behavior, or to companies that are selling food?
Definitely. You always want to be careful about, the data, how you supply that data. I think we focus first on the consumer, just because if we don't have consumers that love this, we're not getting the data, and we're not offering value to consumers. We're not getting any data that a larger entity would like to use. Now, having said that, we have scratched the surface when it comes to the information that we can get from our appliances that can help to test new products and services, and understand people's preferences, so that your Blue Apron or your HelloFresh or your Instacart can actually recommend the things that you are cooking every day, and you don't even have to think about it, right? And I think that is another value of the information coming from smart appliances. And we will certainly look at that at some point. And of course, like I said, you want to be careful and provide aggregate anonymous data that can ultimately help these larger companies innovate better and innovate for you. But that will come with time.
So the smart kitchen of the future, what does that look like, say, years down the road? Is everything going to be, you'll be walking into your kitchen, you're just going to say things and things will happen?
It's kind of like the Jetsons, right? And
Well, flying cars are here.
Flying cars are here. So anything is possible at this point. It's hard to say. What I would imagine is that, we have connected appliances, right? At some point, every appliance is going to be connected. But I still strongly believe that people actually like, to cook, and they like being a part of making something in the kitchen, right? So I think what I see as the smart kitchen of the future is flexibility. If there is a night where you want to say something and you want something to make it for you, whatever that looks like, you can do that. If you want to have full control over your kitchen and the things that you're making, and you want to chop all the vegetables and you want to cook it, you want to control your burners, you can do that too. I think boxing people into doing things a certain way will not work in the long run. And so I see it, this is maybe a very broad answer, and maybe dodging your question a little bit, because I just don't know. But
Nobody knows.
Yeah. But I think it will be flexible, and it will also, to what we just talked about earlier, it will also be catered to your preferences, so that you are getting suggestions, whether it's your meal kit company, or whether it's what else would you have? Or even if it's the recipes, right, that you're looking at, and using the number of people that you're going to have. I think all of these things are going to be a lot easier to manage, especially because our lives are not getting any less busy. They're not any less connected, right? It's only going to keep getting more hectic. And, when I always think about, we have this video about the kitchen and how it's changed really with every century. And that change happens because our needs as consumers change, right? And in an age of technology where we are more connected and distracted as ever, I think, the kitchen and all of the technology is going to have to keep up with that, so that we can continue on, this pace, for better or for worse.
Well, I look forward to watching your developments in the smart kitchen, and thank you all for listening. And thank you for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.
Thanks, Chuck.